A legendary pop music figure has died. George Martin is known as the fifth Beatle for his longtime collaboration with one of the world's most famous rock and roll bands. And CCTV's Jim Spellman is here with more on Martin's life, his influence on popular music.
What an incredible legacy to leave behind. Most record producers, they work in the background. Many of us have no idea who the producers are on most songs, but George Martin redefined the role of the music producer. His influence can be heard on many of the Beatles' biggest hits.
He was known as the fifth Beatle, the producer who helped make the Fab Four the biggest band in the world in the 1960s. Sir George Martin died Tuesday at his home in England. He was 90. Martin looked and acted nothing like the mop-top Beatles, but the dapper English gentleman formed a lasting bond with the group, going on to produce more than 200 Beatles tracks.
The Beatles were a unique quartet because they each contributed a great deal to each other, and the four of them became larger than the individual parts.
Martin pushed the group to new heights and added distinctive flourishes, like the string section on the classic song Yesterday.
In those days, in 1965, Yesterday was recorded, and the very first time I ever wrote a score for the Beatles, and very first time that any Beatle recorded by himself.
Martin won 6 Grammys and was nominated for an Oscar for A Hard Day's Night. In 1996, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth. At Abbey Road Studios in London, fans are paying respect.
I think as a backroom guy, he was never particularly prominent with the Beatles, but he was always there. He was always behind them, he was always above them, he was always there.
Tributes have poured in from fellow producers like Quincy Jones and world leaders including British Prime Minister David Cameron. On Facebook, Beatles drummer Ringo Starr wrote, "God bless George Martin," and in a statement, Paul McCartney wrote, "I have so many wonderful memories of this great man that will be with me forever. He was a true gentleman and like a second father to me."
Many musicians and producers today still consider the relationship between the Beatles and George Martin to be the ultimate musical collaboration. Mike, I'm sure the Beatles would have been successful without George Martin, but it's hard to picture them becoming such a band that embraced whether it's strings or psychedelic music or going on these forays well outside of what pop music was about in 1963, 1964.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was hearing that McCartney wrote down for Yesterday, because of the string quartet, he wrote his name, Lennon's name, Martin's name, and then Mozart, because he did infuse things in there that was kind of a surprise. And I think you hit on something. We were talking about this. Here you got these 4 guys, young guys, long hair, and here's this really urbane guy, and he brought something to the table.
I think there was an essential trust there between them. As a generation older than him, from a classical music environment, from a stuffy environment, wearing suits and ties to work, the opposite of rock and roll, but they were able to trust him, and he was able to get them to really change rock and roll, to bring in these strings and bring in all these other things. And I think that really took a lot of trust, because I'm sure it wasn't easy for a musician in their early 20s, you know, Fab Four, mop tops, to embrace doing something quiet, to do something with a violin. I mean, this was not the instruments of rock and roll, but it's hard to picture the Beatles without that kind of added layer of sophistication.
No, and the music lives on forever. I mean,
doing a story like this all day around, walking around with Beatles songs in my head, it's incredible.
Yeah, and I was out for a walk today, and not far from here, I think it's the National Theater. They've got Rain, you know, it's the tribute band, and they've been playing for years now.
Right.
So the music lives on. Thanks so much, Jim.